Today. Sorry we're a few minutes late getting started. Technical difficulties are never fun. So today's topic that we're going to cover is the impact of a great mentor. And today, joining me on the panel, we've got three very distinguished guests. Carol Nickoson, who's the Director of Fraternity and Sorority Life, Director of New Student Days at Wittenberg. She's a lifelong volunteer and supporter of Phi Kappa Psi. So Carol, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. We also have Rob Nagel, who's our Senior Director of Alumni Engagement and Housing, and Tryon Hubbard, who is a former national president of the fraternity and a very dedicated volunteer. So thank you all for joining us today for this conversation. Today we're going to discuss the power of a great mentor, and I think myself, like everyone, hopefully has had the opportunity to have one, but perhaps some of our younger men are not aware of the criticality of not only having a mentor, but ultimately of becoming a mentor. And so I think everyone on this call has benefited from at least an individual who's invested in their personal and professional development. And none of us would be where we are today if it wasn't for that person taking time out of their busy schedule to ask tough questions and really challenge us and broaden our horizons. So as a result, we wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the proper role of a mentor and why it's important for all of our members to make these connections. And so I'd like to start the conversation, Rob, with you. I'll let you kick us off today. And just give us your thoughts on what a great mentor looks like to you.
Okay. I think the biggest thing is that a good mentor is going to set a good example. I think that's the first thing that we need to focus on when we're talking about mentorship. They should be a positive role model for sure. I think it's important that they take a personal interest in what's going on in the lives of these young men in our example, working with fraternity men. Obviously sharing skills, knowledge, expertise, whether it's in their field or from whatever experiences they have, both professional, personal, general life experiences. I think that they also have to be really enthusiastic about it. You can't kind of be real blah and connect with some of our men. I don't think that works very well. Valuing growth and ongoing learning, I think, is remarkably important, as well as giving guidance. And I think also, again, setting the right example is the right thing that we want to talk about. If our undergraduate men see that their mentors or people that they look up to that are either alumni or their chapter advisors are doing positive things with their lives and with the community, then I think it's going to have a trickle-down effect for our members as well.
Great, thank you. Carol, can you tell us about one of your own personal mentors and the role they play in your life?
Absolutely. So I've considered a lot of people my mentors, but the one that sticks out the most for me is Tom Dake. Tom was my supervisor when I worked at the University of California, Riverside. It was my first professional job. He was my supervisor in the student life office as both an undergraduate and a professional when I worked there. As an undergraduate, I worked as a student with student orientation and student organization programs, and Tom was really the closest thing we had at the time to a Greek advisor, and so he was crucial to me in developing my leadership skills as a student leader. And when I was in college, he had had no formal training or leadership experience working with fraternity and sorority life. And so he was bringing an outside perspective, which for me was very important in working with fraternities and sororities in the future. After I'd graduated, Tom had hired me full time, and I had the opportunity to work with orientation, student organizations, and fraternity and sorority life. And that was really my first opportunity to work with Phi Kappa Psi as well. Tom was the person who introduced me to student affairs and really pushed me as a professional. He did a lot of things like teaching me how to think outside of my comfort zone and try new things that I maybe wouldn't have even considered doing, to listen actively with other individuals and to pay attention to context. And there was so much more. And then really on a personal level, Tom was an incredibly supportive person for me, just as a young adult. My father had died unexpectedly when I worked there, and my mom had been physically incapable of caring for herself. And Tom was the one who really made sure that I felt comfortable in a working environment, but also gave back to my family. And it's something that I would never forget. He is the one who encouraged me to apply to positions away from the university, knowing that he was going to lose me as an employee, but he knew that I needed those opportunities to really grow in my career. And I don't think my life would have gone on the trajectory it had if it weren't for Tom.
Awesome story. Just absolutely awesome. I'm sure all of us can relate to that from that side. What I'd like to do now is Tryon, I'd like to throw it over to you and maybe tell us a little bit about an experience you've had mentoring a Phi-Sci student, and what do those interactions typically look like?
Well, when I was on the executive council, I traveled, of course, quite a lot to many different Phi-Sci situations, whether it was job installation, Woodrow Wilson Leadership School, a variety of circumstances, and a lot of active in both formal. Often, though, I'd get a question and realize that there was a concern, and that presented an opportunity to at least be an informal mentor. Frequently, I could then coach that person through the process or the concern that they had. And because I was frequently traveling, as I said, we usually continued, if necessary, by phone or email in a continued contact situation. So I think that was a little different than what a lot of people would experience, but it certainly was valid mentoring in that case as well.
Yep, no, that's fantastic, and I think it's interesting hearing from both sides. Carol's personal experience of having a mentor, and Tryon your experience of actually mentoring. Carol, let me go back to you. I mean, given you've worked with college students for a number of years, what kind of impact have you seen on those students when they're paired with an effective mentor?
Sure. I think that there's short and long-term impacts that mentors can have on college students. In the short term, those mentors are really going to be critical in helping those students navigate resources, whether that be at the organization level or at the institution level. Those students are learning how to address conflict, and the mentors can really be useful in mediating some of those conversations, and then helping students manage their priorities. I know that sometimes mentors are able to assist students in really determining what's the best priority for them at that time. Most of the fraternity and sorority advisors that I work with are considered mentors by the chapter leaders, and the impact of their work has really been immeasurable. I can't tell you how much advisors are appreciated in the fraternity and sorority world, and I know everyone on this call agrees with me on that. I think, however, that the long-term impacts are much more meaningful and much more valuable, especially when you have mentors who are assisting students in the ways of challenging their thinking, or maybe having them look at all sides of a situation, or maybe telling them some of the things they maybe don't want to hear about. That's when I see the strongest impact. A mentor really has to be able to provide that real direct advice and the leadership to those individuals to make sure that they are being effective. Finally, I would say that mentors who are able to encourage a mentee to become a mentor themselves are crucial. I don't think our fraternity and sorority communities would be continuing right now if we didn't have alumni who were willing to be mentors and students who were learning how to step up into that type of environment.
Got it. Yeah. No, I think all very valid points. So maybe, Tryon, let me go back to you again from the other side. From your years of mentoring younger generations of folks, what have you learned by being a mentor to other people?
Well, I think in mentoring people, and I've mentored people both within the fraternity and business and other situations, that what I've tried to do and try to learn to do is to be a good listener and to ask open questions so that I could gain more insight into their concerns and their problems and be able to address them better. So I think that may be the key to being a mentor, is simply to listen and gently until you find out what the real concern is, and then try your best to address it.
Yep, no, I think that's a great point, Tryon. I think, and I've heard that many times, both from my experience as a coach and a mentor, being on both sides of that table, that listening really is such a crucial skill for everybody, but particularly those that are mentors, and then being able to, as Carol mentioned, really reflect back and ask some of those tough questions to really get you to self-reflect. Because that's really where a lot of the growth comes from. Rob, I'm kind of wrapping up with you here in terms of our last question of the day. In your role as our Senior Director of Alumni and Housing, what type of role do you see for our alumni, that our alumni have in mentoring Five-Size? Obviously, Tryon's a great example, but more broadly, what type of role do you see our alumni playing in that regard, and how could we do more of that?
Sure. Well, I think in a lot of cases it happens naturally, from facilitation at our leadership programs to our Grand Arch Council to Woodrow Wilson programs, those sort of things. Whenever you get a room of alumni and undergraduates together, I think there's just a natural flow that will take place in conversation. And it can expand. I remember personally being an undergraduate and speaking with our alumni whenever I would get the chance, whether it was homecoming, Founders Day, a national convention, and just kind of me picking their brain to see what information I could get, mainly at that time on, how do I get a job? How important are our grades? How important is this? How important is that as I move forward and train out of college life into the professional world? I just think that there's so many options and a lot of chances for us to really connect our undergraduates with our alumni who have a ton of life experience that they can aid them in without being overly pushy, as Tryon mentioned, probing, but not being too difficult, not going too deep on it. Gently being there, asking questions, and above all, listening. So I think with the amount of alumni and undergraduates we have, putting them together, I just think the natural mentorship starts to begin.
Yes, I totally agree. I think it does need to be a very natural and flowing conversation. So thank you all. Rob, any parting thoughts or comments, last recommendations or tips for those listening to this video?
Sure. I would say to the alumni, whenever you can get in front of undergraduates, make sure you are there for them. To undergraduates, one of the best things you can get experience-wise out of a fraternity is going up to, introducing yourself to, and speaking with alumni. Pick their brain. You're not going to be in college forever. So I think it's important that you get some information from some people that are out in the real world.
Tryon, how about yourself? Any parting thoughts or last recommendations for those listening? Okay.
I do. That being a mentor doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be difficult. It takes caring, and if you can't help a person, it's trying to help them find someone who can. So don't ever worry that you'll be doing the wrong thing by trying to help.
Great advice. Great advice. And certainly, last but not least, Carol, any parting thoughts?
Sure. I would say to undergraduates out there, if you're looking for mentors for your individual members or for your chapter, and you don't feel like you have the support from your local alumni, you do, first of all. But if you don't feel like you have a whole lot out there, or chapters who are maybe in a more rural environment, or you don't have as close of a connection to your alumni, seek other mentors on your campus or in your community. There are so many people that we could be introducing to fraternity and sorority organizations that maybe haven't thought about being involved. And oftentimes if you ask them, they're happy to step up to the plate.
Got it. Yes, I agree. I think certainly there's no shortage. There's from my experience of mentors or coaches, it's really just a matter of individuals just asking. And like Tryon pointed out, if you are asked, don't be afraid, step up. They're asking you for a reason. Help them out, just as you've been helped. So with that, I want to say thank you for each of you for joining us today for another edition of Hit the Mark with Mark. Thank you all very much for your time, and hopefully we get to chat again soon.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Of course.